Lahavin, to understand. Mipnei ma, why is it the Yom Tov of Pesach is on the day that the miracle occurred? Pesach is the same day that the miracle occurred. What day we left Egypt? And that was when we celebrate every year the same day that we went out of Egypt. Same day we ate matzah, we celebrate eating matzah. Masha'enken, Chanukah and Purim, both of them are on the day that's after the Yom HaMenucha. This is after they won the battle. It says that they've rested from the. So the day of the victory in Purim was one day before when we celebrate Purim. And the day of the victory of Chanukah, when they went in and they defeated their enemies, that was the day before, right? They defeated their enemies on the 24th. And on the 25th is when they lit the candles and made the whole thing. So that we celebrate the holiday on the day after the miracle of Purim and of Chanukah, which is not the case. Pesach. On Pesach, we celebrate the holiday on the same day that the miracle occurred. So what's the difference between them? So the Rebbe is going to say that the difference is going to be a spiritual difference, and we'll see what the spiritual difference is. First of all, we have to proceed by the topic of Mammalic Kolmim and Soviv Kolmim, which we talked about a lot before in this Maimer. Basically, Mammalic Kolmim is the creation, all the different aspects of the creation, how plants are different than minerals, and how animals are different from plants, and how humans are different from animals, and how each animal is different from every other animal, and how there's spiritual worlds and the angels and different levels of angels and different levels of worlds, and there's Yetzirah and Bria and Atzilus, and then there's the 10 Sfirot, and there's all these different aspects and articulations of godliness. And all of this is what's called Mammalic. And then there is just pure godliness, pure being, the fact of existence. And that's everywhere equally. It's everywhere equally. That is, so to speak, Mammali is like the creation, and Soviv is like the creator. Okay, there's different aspects of Soviv Kolmim also, but not because it's differentiated, just because there's more revelation or less revelation. So here we go. Memale, this is the light and the life which is drawn into every single aspect of the world and in all the souls. And then afterwards into the angels, until finally it's drawn into this physical world. I'm sorry, I read this wrong. Mamale, this is the light and life of the worlds which is drawn into the souls. The souls we said is higher. Afterwards into the angels. And then afterwards it comes into this physical world. Hari, no, that's known. Sha'olam is that this physical world receives from what's called 70 chieftain angels. Vasarim, and these angels, these lowest level of angels, they receive from malachim, from angels that are gavoa miel gavoa, higher and then higher from them. So all these different levels of spirituality and angels, and then from these lowest angels comes the life force of this world. But a Soviv, what does Soviv call me? This is the level of life and light that's not drawn down at any levels, but it's kulam echad, it's all one. If you want to say it, pure existence, the fact that everything exists, not how it exists. So in some ways, the Soviv, the fact that everything exists, it's more revealed godliness. Because the fact that everything exists, so you see that, one plant gives birth to another plant, and they had this the whole theory of evolution, and that from amoebas, there comes the frogs, and from frogs there comes monkeys, from monkeys there comes human beings, right? So you can see, it sort of seems a little bit logical, but the fact that everything exists, just the fact of existence, is not logical at all. Just being, the fact that everything is, right? What is keeping it going? From where did it come from? You can say that a frog came from a tadpole, and a tadpole came from an amoeba. An amoeba came from a cell, and a cell came from an atom, and an atom came from this. Okay, but where does existence come from? Just pure existence. The fact that things are. I would remember there was this figure, the fellow, what was Hawking or something, and he said he's got to figure out how the world began. That it came from some sort of black holes, and there was magnetism and everything, and then that's how the world came from. But where did the first thing come from? The first magnetism, the first hole, the first law of nature. Who passed the laws of nature? Where did it come from? So this is totally incomprehensible. So that's another aspect of God, right? If you want to God, spiritual worlds, those are hard to comprehend, but still it's comprehensible. A person dies. Everybody sees you've got a soul. Nobody knows what it is. Those things about your soul and about the spiritual and the physical, that's all what's called the aspect of God that fills the world. But the aspect of God, pure godliness, that's what's called Sovev Kolmim. That's just existence, being. And in that, we say the highest of spiritual worlds is the same thing as a rock. They all exist. This one exists in a higher form, this in a lower form. For instance, the soul, in the person's soul. Yesh Gamkin, there's also two types of life force of the soul. One comes from soul, your intelligence, to the emotions, and from the emotions to the thought, and from thought to speech, and etc. The second shines on everything equally. This is what we see when a person rises up in a person's will, in his brain, to do something, then everything is equal. Miyad karega, instantly, mibli shiyata, as soon as a person has will to do something, so the will is everywhere in his body. So if so, there's will is something like the Soviv Kolomim. That's like the being of the person. Right? Who is Joe? Right? Grandpa. Grandpa's he moved his finger today. He expressed his will. There's Grandpa's there. So it wouldn't make any difference to know that Grandpa is still there, right? He's still alive, if his will moved his finger, or if his will wrote a book. That Grandpa, what is it? That's his will. So will is something like in a person, this idea of everything is equal, no distinctions, because the will of a person affects his little toe just like it affects his brain, and it affects it immediately. It doesn't take any time from when they come from the brain until it comes down to the foot. So it must be a person can train himself. It's not that he has to think about how he moves his fingers and how so it can happen faster than a person can even think. You ever see these pianists and things like that? They can move faster than a person would normally be able to think. Why? Because that's his will, and his will is everywhere equally in the body. So it is by God. There's two types of life. There's Mammalic. This is what a flow of godliness which comes in a revealed way, and it's drawn in an orderly fashion. And on this it says Molikal or Kavodo. On this it says that the whole world is filled with God's glory. In other words, just God's glory, Kavodo, like a ray of godliness. Right? It's like a person that he's a piano player, so he's what happens if his fingers don't work anymore? It doesn't mean that he stops existing. He's still there. Right? He's a genius. His mind goes away, but it's still the person is still there. He still has his will. But there's places which say no. There are places this is what they say. The Spartans and these people, they said that, if a person can't contribute to society, so we kill him. The Germans were big at that. Even before they started killing Jews, right? They were killing old people and killing people with, any sort of a disability or something a little bit, that would impair their contribution to the society. You couldn't pull a trigger to kill them. Soviv kolomim, that's this Mammalic kolomim. These are the aspects of the person. But the person himself, or let's say, there are aspects of God, but God himself in his existence, who she'eno mitgaleh mamash rak bebechinas chitzonius. This only is revealed in an external way of a lo yadei hadraga, but it's no different aspects and limits. B'kulam shavim kamei, everything is equal in front of God. Souls, angels, spirit, physical, even the klippas, even evil, right? We learned about that with Haman. How did Haman exist? How does Hitler exist? How did they exist? God is creating them. How can they create such a terrible thing like that that's against them? So that's this aspect of Soviv Kalman. If you remember, we learned that there's two aspects of Soviv. There's the inside of Soviv and the outside of, no, I'm sorry, that's in the mimer of Contras Amayan. By the way, anyone who wants to, we learn every Sunday night. This next 2 weeks we won't do it because it's Passover. But every Sunday night at 10 o'clock Israeli time, we learn there's people in Germany, and I learned with them a book called Contras Amayan. It's very interesting. And there it talks about this also. Soviv Kolmim and Mammalic Kolmim, and how the non-Jews idolaters, how they receive from this level of Soviv Kolmim also. Okay. Now we're going to get to Passover. Like it says, the heavens and the earth I fill. This is God, his essence, Yisparech. Molei Shamayim, the God fills the heavens and the earth equally. Okay, so now we know these two aspects of godliness. One is the creation, spiritual, physical, different levels. Everything is different from everything else. Time, every moment is different. Every place is different. Right? Nothing is the same as anything else is. Every atom has its place. Every time is different. And then we have the oneness of God. The oneness of God is what does all this have in common? Existence. It all exists. So this is, so to speak, the Creator himself. That's Soviv Kalman. Okay, now let's get back to Passover and Purim and Chanukah. In Pesach it says, Pesach Hashem ala Petach. It says that God jumped over the openings. He jumped over the doors. Perush, what does it mean? Right, when God was killing the firstborn. So he said they put blood on the inside of the doors, and God jumped over the doors. Passed over the Joe. That's the Passover. Passed over the Perush, what does it mean? Shahaya Hanes al Yadei Hiskalos Ha'ara. The miracle was by means of a revelation of this ray of godliness that jumps over. What does it mean it jumps over? Not by means of the normal chain of creation from level to level. In other words, what happened? What happened on Passover? What happened? God himself took the Jews out of Egypt. The Jews didn't do anything, right? They didn't do anything. God said, just sit in your house, take a Pesach offering, take a sheep, slaughter it, put the blood on the inside of the doors, and then eat it with matzah. And then what's going to happen then? You'll be satisfied. You're filled up with food. What do you mean? It's not what's going to happen. What's going to happen is I am going to jump over, kill all the firstborn, and jump over your houses. So don't worry. What has that got to do with anything with what they did? They ate some meat, and all of a sudden, because of that, their enemies were destroyed. Right? If we would have known that, we wouldn't have to spend money on missiles and tanks and warfare and have an army, and they're just everybody sit in your house, eat sheep, and all of the enemies will die, right? And anybody who thought to do bad to the Jews, that's it. They'll all die. So it doesn't make any sense. The Jews did nothing, and all of a sudden God killed all the firstborn. It's not that he killed all the firstborn because it was some sort of a genetic thing, right? No, it jumped over the houses of the Jews who were exactly the same as the non-Jews. In fact, there were times where there were even non-Jews in the houses of Jews and Jews in the houses of non-Jews, and it would jump over them also. It would jump over the Jews, and it would smite only the non-Jews, the firstborn. So this is what's going on. This is some sort of a revelation of God himself. This has nothing to do with the creation. This is the creator himself. This is Sobiv Kolamim. Like it says, Va'avarti, I went over. I passed over. I and not an angel, not by means of an emissary. And the reason is that it had to be this way, that the source of all being jumped over the Jewish people. Listen, when God gave the Torah, so it's always a question of what is God? Who is God? What is the God of the Jews? So we can see in the Ten Commandments. The Ten Commandments. First of all, the Ten Commandments is the Torah. So we know God gives the Torah. He gave the Torah to the Jews. That's number one. Number two, God says, I am God. I took you out of Egypt. Took you out of Egypt. So we know that number one is that God gave the Torah. Here, this the Ten Commandments, the Torah. Number two, God took us out of Egypt. It's the same God that took us out of Egypt. And the fourth of the Ten Commandments is, I am God. I created heavens and the earth. 6 days I created the heavens and the earth. The seventh day I rested, right? The whole heavens and the earth. So here we have three the notable, how do you say, characteristics of God, right? Want to call it birthmarks, whatever you want. The characteristics of God. He gives the Torah. He took the Jews out of Egypt, and he creates the heavens and the earth. Anything except for this is forbidden to worship, even by the non-Jews. But let's look and see what this means. God creates the heavens and the earth. It means that he's totally above everything. He created the heavens. The heavens means the spiritual worlds. He created all that. So he's above everything. All of a sudden, no, God took us out of Egypt. Oh, so he's inside of everything. How can he be inside of everything? Why did he just take the Jews out? What's going on over here? He says, that's the Torah. God gave the Torah. We can say another thing also, another aspect of God is that he chose the Jews. He chose the Jews to create the world and give the Torah and take them out of Egypt. So there's 4 trademarks of God. He chose the Jews, he gave the Torah, took the Jews from Egypt, and he creates everything that we see, the whole world. Well, this God is the God that took the Jews out of Egypt. Why did it have to be this way? Shelo komo machane Sanherib. There's a story about the camp of Sanherib. I think this was on the first day of Passover. You have to look and see. I think so. That Sanherib, this was in the first temple. Sanherib laid siege to the Jewish. Sanherib was from Assyria, and he conquered the whole world also. And he laid siege to Jerusalem. This was in a time when the king was Chezkiyahu Melech, and Chezkiyahu Melech. He was the prophet at that time was Isaiah the prophet, Yeshayahu the prophet. Chezkiyahu Melech married Yeshayahu's daughter. Thought they would have. It's a long story. From that came out to one of the worst, most murderous kings in the history of Manasseh. Came from that. Anyway, in the days of Sanherib, so Sanherib came and he laid siege to Jerusalem. He conquered the whole world. He had a huge army of like 100,000 men or something. And he laid siege to it. And Yeshai was all worried. And the king was worried. And Yeshai the prophet came to him and said, don't worry about it. God told me he's going to decimate them all. And he said, oh, that's the prophecy? He went to sleep. He was calm. It was his whole nation, the whole Jewish nation was about to be destroyed. Right? And just because he got a prophecy, so he was calm. Woke up in the morning, an angel came down and destroyed the whole entire camp of Sanherib. Killed them all. It says, Vayetze Malach Hashem, there came an angel of God, Vayach V'machan Ashur, and he destroyed the camp of Assyria. Ashur, I think it's Assyria. And the same thing with Sisro. The story with Barak Sisro. The story with Devorah. Ki Sham over there, Haya rach shlichus bilavad. There, it was just a messenger of God. The davar muchan, for something that was already prepared. And here was the camp. They were all sitting there. It was a clear, easy target. Tzeva paga, God said, go and kill them, which is not the case in Egypt. God over there had to discern who was going to be a firstborn. God said, I'm going to kill the firstborn. Who was the firstborn? Call Bechor to kill all the firstborn. Tzarech Havchana, over there he had to discern. Leidam mihu Bechor, who's the firstborn? To the father. Firstborn is for the father. Shahayu shtufizima, because they were very licentious people. And also even the firstborn for the mother. It's hard to know. Why? Because they were elders. What's it mean? Look, here we have a house of Egyptians. Here are Egyptians. There's a grandpa. There's only the males, right? Only the males. Here's grandpa. Here's a grandpa. He's not a firstborn. That's what he thinks. He's not a firstborn, right? He's not a firstborn. But the fact of the matter is that yes, he was the firstborn. He was the firstborn from 5 generations. What is it? It's 80 years ago. He was the firstborn. His mother was licentious. She had relations with some who knows what. She gave birth to somebody, and she told her father that it was from him. So he's really the firstborn of the mother. He's the firstborn of the mother. Then the father has relations with this lady. He doesn't know that she's had other children. He doesn't. And he has children. He thinks that this kid is the firstborn, but it's really not. Right? It could be, though, that this one that he thinks is the first, not his firstborn, is the firstborn from the milkman. Because the milkman had relations with this lady. And it's his firstborn. So that was all confused. Nobody knew who was the firstborn. Well, God had to come down and arrange things. So he killed the firstborn. He had to know who it was. It wasn't like with the angel in the camp of Sanherib. Shayuz Canim. The angel couldn't know, we didn't have the power to discern one the other. So here we have, so we have to remember, God, this Soviv Kolomim, he creates the worlds, right? But the one aspect of him is what's called Mammalic Kolomim, that he creates everything differently, like we said. But the essence of God himself, there's no difference. There's no difference. And there was this thing of Mammalic, God fills all the world. This is an aspect of God. An aspect of God. From this aspect of God, that's where angels and things like that come from. But the essence of God, that he's much above all of these details, and he's the one that creates all the details. So from the essence of God, there can come things that all of these details can't do. And one of them was taking the Jews out of Egypt. Also creating the world, the fact that everything exists. And so that's what happened in Passover. And Passover was from the essence of God, came down and took the Jews out. And that's what it says in the Sforim. The reason is because the angel can't come down so low. Why did God come and take the Jews out of Egypt? Because angels can't come down so low in a place of Tuma because it's so low. Says the Rebbe, that's not a really good answer. I mean, all you have to do is just look at the story of Machan Ashur, what happened with Sennacherib, that God sent. Why didn't God do it himself, right? Why did God send an angel there? The camp of Ashur was certainly no less, right, no more impure, more defiled than Egypt was, right? They were also murderers and rapists and terrible things. So the reason that God took them out personally wasn't because that an angel can't come down so low. Because an angel did come down so low. The angel destroyed the camp of Assyria. It did come down. Why did it do? In any case, however it was, whatever the reason is, the fact of the matter is that when God took the Jews out of Egypt, he did it himself. Let's forget about why the reason was, but that's what it was. I took them out. And not from any aspect of godliness. And that's the first of the 10 commandments. Anochi, I am God that took you out of Egypt. If so, now we can understand the question we had. Because this holiday, Yom Tov, what is Yom Tov? What is a holiday? A holy day. Even in English, Yom Tov, in Hebrew, it's a Yom Tov means a good day. Good means that there's light that's shining in it. But also the same thing in Hebrew, in English, a holy day. What's a holy day? It means revelation of God's holiness, his essential holiness. You can't have this revelation of God's essence until you get rid of the bad. Like it says, and then I have destroyed the evil. Okay, so on Passover, everything happened at once. God destroyed the bad and he took out the good. He took out the Jews at the same time because it came from God's essence. But on Purim, it didn't go that way. And Purim, first of all, you had to get rid of the bad. Harag at Sonayim. We just finished the holiday of Purim. Then they had to destroy the bad. 75,000 they were from the tribe of Amalek. These were, right? Remember the story. What was the story of Purim? That the king Achashverosh gave the Jews permission to fight back. Gave the Jews permission and Haman had been killed already almost a year earlier. So the only ones that wanted to kill the Jews, right, were people that they were willing to die. They were willing to die. To get rid of the Jews, they were willing to do anything. So these people, the 75,000 that the Jews killed, these were all from the tribe of Amalek. This is a klipa atzuma. This is a tremendous, powerful force of anti-God. And this, God had to get rid of them. Like it says, Reshit Goyam Amalek, the beginning of the idolaters is Amalek. And the only solution is to destroy them totally. If you remember, we learned a mimer that said that not necessarily that God, that's what the king said, to Mordechai, take the garment and put it on, right? He told Amalek, I'm sorry, that the king told Haman, who was Amalek, he told Haman, take the garment and put it on Mordechai. And remember, we learned the mimer, and the Rebbe said from this, we can learn that in the future, not necessarily will Amalek have to be destroyed. It could be that he can be tamed, that he'll take the cloak and give it to Mordechai. Okay. In any case, it says they have to be destroyed. That's what the pasuk says. The kativ is machatimcha. It says wipe out all of Amalek, Haman, and the 10 sons of Haman, etc. So first of all, they had to get rid of all the evil. And then afterwards, they made the Yom Mishtev B'Simcha. On Purim, first of all, they got rid of the evil. And then they could make the happy day. Mishloach Manot, etc. Then there could be revealed holiness. Al derech mashal, just like a king. For instance, a king, when he wants he wants to live in a house, a new castle or whatever, then first of all, he has to clean it out from all the dirt. Therefore, it was in 2 days. The first day was getting rid of the bad. And afterwards, there could be the revealing of the good. That was on Purim. Because the revelation came from this Mammalic Almim. This was an aspect of God, something like the angel that destroyed Sancheriv. And the revelation was a gradual one. It was from Mammalic Almim. This is by means of level, gradual. First of all, getting rid of the bad, then there can be revelation of the good. You can't have both of them together. And the same thing was also in Hanukkah, right? What did they do? They cleaned out the temple, they purified the temple, and then they started then there could be the miracle. And to defeat the enemy first. Of all Nesa Pesach, but the miracle of Passover, which was from the essence of God, Soviv Ka'omim, this aspect of God which surrounds all the worlds, is before the worlds, before creation. It's not divided at all. Then there could be shining to all of them at once. There could be there could be at one time the two things: a plague on the Egyptians, Makat Bachorot, the firstborn died, and revelation of the holiness to the Jewish people, until the Jewish people were saying, Hallel, that's what we praise, God. So that's what happened on Passover. Passover, we're celebrating the revelation of the essence of God in the world, the lowest possible things. God revealed himself, discerned between the Jewish firstborn and the non-Jewish firstborn. And you have to realize that it says the Jewish people were also idolaters over there. It says that they were Elu Ve'elo of the Avodah Zarah. And that which some people say that the firstborn were killed before midnight, and this was after midnight, it's not so. Exactly at the same time, exactly at midnight, exactly the same thing happened. God smote the firstborn and he freed the Jews, revealed himself. Okay, now we have to understand something. 1 second. It's sort of like a contradiction. We said that the level of Soviv Kol Omim, that there is no differences. There's no difference between bad and good, and Haman and Mordechai and right and Paro and Moshe and holiness. So if so, why was there a difference? Why did God choose the Jews? I thought there was no difference from the Soviv Kol Omim. Says, understand. Now we have to understand. How did he understand from the Soviv Kol Omim came a difference between the firstborn and not the firstborn? The Soviv Kol Omim, does it have distinctions or doesn't it? What happened? Here we just finished saying it doesn't, and all of a sudden we say, no, it does. That's how we discern. So now here's the question. Of the Havim, we have to understand, since this aspect of Soviv Kol Omim, this is equal. Ulefi Elofanav, in front of God, like darkness is like light. And if you do good, so there's no difference. So the Soviv Kol Omim, that's how all the evil is created. Mammalic. How does it exist? God is creating it. They all have that same common property of existence. I thought there was no difference. So the Rebbe says, okay, so how did God choose the Jews? So he says like this. How could it be that from there was drawn down a plague to the Jews and a blessing to the Jews, a plague to the Egyptians and a blessing to the Jews? How? It's like what it says in the Pri-Eitz Chaim. Pri-Eitz Chaim is a book, the wisdom of the Arizal. Pirush Avadim Hayinu, when it says Avadim Hayinu v'Yotzienu Hashem Elokeinu, it says Hashem Elokeinu. This is Abba Ba'im Shil Bishu B'Zrod LaErech Anpin. So it says, who took us out of Egypt? It says Hashem Elokeinu. Hashem Elokeinu, this is Chachma and Bina, Ava'im is Chachma and Bina, that they became the vessels for Erech Anpin. Now, Erech Anpin, that's the lowest aspect of what's called God's crown. So let's see what this means. Perish. Kihine, Yisrael, the Jewish people, they come from this aspect of Panim. That what we said that there's Soviv Kol Omim. Well, in Soviv Kol Omim, there's what's called the inside of it and the outside. The inside of Soviv Kol Omim, this is like the essence of God that's infinitely above the worlds. Soviv Kol, the lower part of Soviv Kol Omim, right? That's already the essence of God, yes, but how it's relevant to the world, it creates the world. It's true, everything is equal. But it creates the world. So there's what's called the inner level of this Soviv and the outer level. Like it says, Yoer Hashem panav elecha, God will shine his face on you. So when it means that shine your face, what does it mean you shine your face on somebody? It means that you really like them. Right? You really like them. There was maybe the example in America, in the beginning when there was the blacks in America were very they were very prejudiced against. People really hated them, especially the white people in the South. And then there started all these legislation and things like that, and then things changed, and then the blacks were given the right to vote, and then they had to vote, and they were encouraged to vote, and then they were accepted in all jobs, and then suddenly they realized that they were just like everybody else. They're just a different color. And then but a lot of the people in the South, they couldn't accept it, but they had to accept it. They had no choice. So they had to accept them to work, and they had to say hello, and they had to smile, and they didn't want. Now it's totally changed, despite what the politicians say. Now it's totally changed. It's totally changed. There's a little pockets maybe, but it's totally changed. I mean, in America, they've realized that, exactly the opposite. Different colors is interesting. They're trying to bring back the segregation. Okay, not important. My point is that before, it got accepted, so the white people, they had to give jobs to the to this. So it was that's like they did it from their backside. They did it from the back. Okay, I got to get the law says I have to hire you. The law says there's nothing wrong with intermarriage. So my daughter got married to a black. Okay, so they did it from the backside. They did it from the backside. So in other words, they did it, but it was from the backside, right? Why? Because they hated them. They hated them. They couldn't stand them. Happens also with Jews. Happens with this bigotry. The law says you can't make any distinction. You can't be prejudiced. So, but the people that you really hate on the inside, but you act nice on the outside. So that's what it says. Idolaters, people who sin. So God keeps them alive. He keeps them alive, but it's because it's like the law was passed. He's got to do it. He's got no choice. He's forced to do it. So it says that's what's called God's outside and inside. People who do sins, people who the idolaters. It says that Mammalic, that comes from God's, so to speak, backside. In our case, is what's called the outer level of this Soviv. But the inside, the Mitzrayim, the whole idea of the Egyptians back there, their source was from the backside. There was the Paro is the same letters as Orif, the backside. Paro, the same letters as Orif. The back of the neck is called the Orif. Ulafisha, Yobabachinas Hester, Panim. And because there was in the level, the Jewish people, they were in Egypt, it was in a way of concealment. You couldn't see godliness. You couldn't see who God liked and who God didn't like. Lefi, because Yosef that Yosef and all of his brothers died. Therefore, what happened? Therefore, what happened is that the flow of the world, the life force in the world, came from what's called this backside, this external side of godliness. Command the shadi basakaspe, like a person that throws over the back of his shoulder. Alken, therefore, avadim hayinu laparo. Therefore, Paro was the leader. He ran the world. He could receive from the outer level of this makif of Soviv Kolmin. But afterwards, God said, enough of this outer level, enough of this backside. I'm finished giving from my backside. But afterwards, God took us out. That God took a God shined his face on the Jews. By means of this, Nimshach Itanu Salah. There was drawn to us forever. Forever. So let's just take the all right. So what's it saying? In other words, because the world was upside down, because for whatever reason is God didn't want the Jewish people to shine out as his people. He put them in exile. He wanted them to be in exile. So what happens when the Jews are in exile, when the Jews can't do Jewish things, what they're supposed to? So evil rules, and that's why Paro ruled. That's the way God made it. There's a difference between good and bad. If the Jews do what God wants, then the Jews shine. If not, then the Jews don't. So that's differences, distinctions. How can that come from Soviv Kolmim? So the Rebbe says, because there's an inside of Soviv Kolmim and the outside of Soviv Kolmim. The outside of Soviv Kolmim is the creation of the world. God wants there to be a world. The inside of is the Jewish people explaining to the world that God exists. That's the inside. If the Jews don't do that job, then the world is like a dream. It's like everything's from the outside. It's all external. So it says, even though that this level of Soviv Kolmim, Mitzaratzmo on its own, Ne'amar, it says, or like darkness is like light. There's no difference between bad and good. But Haria Soviv Meir, but we said this surrounding light of God, this shines through the Mammalic Kolmim. That's what we said in Pri Eitz Chaim. That the revelation of God shines through, the essence of God shines through this aspect of God that has distinctions to it. Shari mina halal nimshachad. Like we said in the beginning, remember we were talking about the beginning of the creation of the world? That the oneness of God's light had to be revealed, right? The oneness of God's light, that was called the Kav. but it had to be drawn down into the world in a way that's articulated. So that was what the reason is of this halal, this hollow space that God made. So what is he saying? God's essence shines into the world, but it shines through a process. So mitzad hislabshus, because of this, Mammalic, this is avein, this is chachma and bina that enclose them, that's drawn to take the Jews out of me'avdus lachirus. So suddenly the Jews were able, by means of God making a decision from his essence, and he said, that's it, I'm going to change the world. I want the Jews to be taken out of Egypt. The Jews are now, the message of the Jews is now going to be the dominant one in the world. What's the message of the Jews? That there's a creator, that there's a reason for the creation. And when God made this decision, so the shine, this was soviv ka'olmim into the world, the surrounding level of godliness, where there was, and how did this express itself? Because there was the smiting of the Egyptians and the blessing to the Jews at the same exact time. Which is not the case in Purim and in Chanukah. In Purim and Chanukah, the revelation was more, it wasn't a direct revelation of Soviv Ka'omim, the surrounding aspect of God, like it was in Passover. Passover was a much higher revelation of godliness revealed in the world than Passover and Chanukah. That's why the holidays of Passover and Chanukah also, they occurred in normal ways, natural ways. Right, the story, especially the story of Purim, right? All of a sudden, the king decided to kill his wife, and he decided he was going to marry Esther, and he decided to listen to Haman, and the book all of a sudden opened up. It just happened to be that Mordechai saved the king's life. All these things could happen without God. The same thing with the Chanukah, the miracle of Chanukah. What was it that the Greeks took over, and they defiled all the oil? And the Jews, a handful of Jews, they fought against them, and it was a victory of very few against many. But we see things like this happening, right? It can happen in the world. It can happen. It can happen. True, in such a massive numbers, it can't happen, right? It can't happen, but it hasn't happened, right? That says 13 people defeated an army of 20,000, 30,000. But it's feasible, right? They could make guerrilla warfare. It could be they started and then the people joined with them, and then maybe the Greeks, they lost their enthusiasm. Who knows what? It could be. But the miracles that happened in Passover are totally incomprehensible. It was revealed godliness. Revealed godliness. So therefore, the holiday of Pesach was the same day as the miracle. That's the same day we celebrate, because he didn't have to get rid of the bad and afterwards do the good. God decided one time, that's it. The bad has no more power. Now the good has power. At one time, the whole thing happened, which is not the case of Purim and Chanukah. And Purim and Chanukah came from a lower level, so to speak, of God's essence. And therefore, it had to be more in a natural way. So that's what happens when we eat, when we celebrating the night of Passover. We're sitting there. The essence of God is with us, because what happened, we're just like there was no difference between bad and good back then, and it was revealed in the world. There's also no difference between time. But time is also revealed at that time. There's a very interesting sikha of the Rebbe that expresses this, maybe more than anything else. Okay, so that's what we learned here. We learned this, that on Passover there was a revelation of Soviv Cholomim, the inner will of God, and that was revealed here in the world. Therefore, the holiday was at the same time that the miracle occurred, which is not the case Purim. It was from an aspect of godliness which was not as high, and therefore the miracle happened of getting rid of the enemy on one day, and the next day, the day afterwards, we celebrated because it came from this Mammalic home. So the Rebbe has a sikha. Let me just explain this. I want to learn the sikhas, but let me just insert this here. There's a law on Passover. I'm sorry, that if Passover falls on Shabbat, that we make the meal on Shabbat. We eat matzah on Shabbat. What's so unusual about that? Well, if Rosh Hashanah falls on Shabbat, we don't sound the shofar on Shabbat. And if Sukkot falls on Shabbat, we don't take the lulav and etrog on Shabbat. We don't. And the reason for it is because the rabbis made a decree that maybe you'll take the, if Rosh Hashanah falls on Shabbat, then maybe you'll take the shofar in the street to carry it, to ask a rabbi some details about the laws, how to sound the shofar. And the same thing with lulav and etrog. Maybe you'll carry it in a public domain for amas with 6 feet, and you'll go and ask a rabbi. Maybe you'll have a question about your lulav and etrog, and you'll take it out in the street. You'll forget that it's Shabbat. You'll take it out in the street and you'll ask a rabbi. So because to prevent people from making this terrible mistake, so the Rebbe said, well, what's the same thing about matzah? And there's a lot more questions about matzah than there is on a shofar or a lulav and etrog. There's a big question, and everybody eats the matzah. You know, there's a question. There's no worry you're going to take it out on the street and carry it. So the Rebbe says like this. The Rebbe says, according to Kabbalah, the only way we can explain this is according to Kabbalah. According to Kabbalah, when Rosh Hashanah falls on Shabbat, Shabbat itself adds such a blessing and revelation of God that it's not so necessary to sound the shofar. In other words, the combination of Shabbat and Rosh Hashanah, and similarly, the combination of Shabbat and Sukkot is so high that it's not necessary to sound the shofar on Rosh Hashanah or to take the lulav and etrog on the first day of Sukkot. Not necessary, because there's already that revelation is already from Shabbos, and that's the reason we do the commandments, is to make up more of a revelation of God in the world. Said, but on Passover, no, and because it's not so necessary to sound the shofar, so therefore God doesn't protect you so much. If you decide you want to sound the shofar on Shabbat, God does not protect you so much, and there's a worry that maybe you'll take it and carry it in the public domain. Also, the same thing with lulav and etrog, because it's not so necessary, so God doesn't protect you so much, and there's a worry you'll take it out but not the case of matzah. Matzah is so holy that even when Passover falls on Shabbat, and Shabbat provides the same revelation as like sounding the shofar and Rosh Hashanah and taking the lulav and etrog, but when Passover falls on Shabbat, so the mitzvah of it does not make such a big blessing as matzah does. It makes as much of a blessing as sounding the shofar. It makes much of a blessing as lulav and etrog, but it does not replace the blessing of eating matzah. Therefore, it is necessary to eat matzah in order to bring this extra blessing that matzah brings, that shofar does not bring and lulav and etrog doesn't bring. Because matzah is so important and so holy, even holier than the combination of, therefore, it's so important that God protects you. There's no worry that you're going to take it 4 amas in the Rishus HaRabim. That's how the Rebbe explains. So we see that when we eat matzah is coming from this level of soviv kolmim. It's something that's higher than any of the other revelations, than Purim and Chanukah, and now from what I just told you, even higher than the shofar and the other holidays. So in that way, eating matzah on Passover is the holiest of all of the commandments. Okay, my friends, let us